Employees are generally considered the most valuable asset a company has, as they possess within them human capital that is resourceful for the growth, productivity, and overall performance of the organization. And it's on this basis that employees leaving an organization have been generally seen in the past and in recent times to have a negative effect on the various performance indicators of an organization. Performance indicators could be operational or financial. This is based on the theoretical notion brought by the human capital theory, social capital theory, and the operations disruption framework. When Even though this might be the case, it has also been proven that employee turnover could be beneficial to an organization. Small levels of turnover can also be beneficial to an organization. This is in a specific process performance circumstance. There are a specific set of procedures and standards of operations that have been put in place by the organization which are respected and followed so that the negative impact of turnover on performance is moderated when an employee leaves the organization. Actually, due to its strategic impact on an organization, employee turnover has now become an area of human resource management that is increasingly stirring a lot of debate in the realm of business. This episode looks at one of the most common and most troubling aspects organizations encounter on a daily basis and how it can be overcome. Be sure to watch this episode to the very end. You're watching BT TV. Like in the introduction to this episode, employee turnover is an area of human resource management that has actually attracted a lot of researchers due to its strategic impact on an organization. A couple of definitions have been given for employee turnover. Some authors define it as the voluntary exit of an employee from his employment with his employer when they still had the physical possibility to stay at the time of their leaving. Some say it is the rate at which workers float the labor market from firm to firm, occupation to occupation, and from being employed to being unemployed. It can also be defined as a replacement cycle that involves an employee exiting their role in an organization, voluntarily or involuntarily. All in all, it can thus be deducted from all these definitions that employee turnover has to do with the outflow of employees, be it voluntary or involuntary, from an organization at a set at the set time. But what can really be the driving force behind people leaving an organization? In trying to understand why people leave an organization, it is vital to first of all understand the contextual frameworks behind this act of leaving. There are principally two contextual frameworks on which employee turnover lies. These are content models and process models. While the former gives reason as to why employees leave an organization, e.g., the level of job stress, lack of motivation, the latter focus on the ways or thought process through which these employees undergo when making the decision to quit, e.g., developing feelings of dissatisfaction, thinking about quitting, searching for alternative employment, and then quitting their current jobs. Models like the March and Simon turnover model of 1958 actually explain that employees leave an organization because of two main reasons, which are perceived desirability of movement and perceived ease of movement. This model points out job satisfaction or fulfillment, including pay, opportunities, promotion, as common reasons for perceived desirability of movement. It also blames what we call biodata like age to be responsible for this. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the model notes job alternatives or openings as determinants of the ease of movement. Meanwhile, models like the Porter and Stairs met expectation model, which explains that a person's motivation to stay in an organization or job is greatly influenced by how much of their needs or expectations are met. This model implies that employees are demotivated when their needs are not met. According to this model, expectation is the gap between what an individual expected to encounter and what they actually encounter on the job. The third model that constitutes a contextual framework on which employee turnover lies will actually be the causal model of turnover by price. This model looks at the determinants of turnover by breaking them down into exogenous and intervening exogenous actually endogenous and intervening endogenous variables. And exogenous variables comprise of the environment, and this environment constitute off work settings that constrain people from staying in an organization, e.g. the availability of alternative job opportunities elsewhere, which could be referred to as the career environment, deters people from staying in their current job and thus increasing turnover the more. This even worsens when these alternatives actually offer better benefits. In terms of endogenous variables, the model cites general training, job involvement, positive and negative affectivity. According to this model, unlike firm specific trainings, general training increases to a greater proportion the rate of employee turnover. And lastly, it will be the job embeddedness model by Mitchell and Lee. This model shows the investment employees make on and off the job. The model proposes and shows the following factors that could be used to predict turnover. These factors are the links the employee has with others on and off the job, their fit in the organization and the community, and the potential sacrifice if the employee were to leave the job or community. The model shows that the more people are embedded to their jobs, the less likely they are to leave the organization. While on the other hand, Turnover causes an organization to lose its valuable employees in terms of their skills and knowledge, and thus plunges the company's financial performance due to replacement costs and its drain on income. The human capital theory assumes that the level of one's education can influence their productivity and hence their earnings, implying that the outflow of employees will negatively impact performance in an organization as skills, experience, and know-how gained through unique and non-transferable firm-specific trainings will be lost. This goes a long way to hurt the company's profitability, as new expenditures will now need to still be incurred to drain and put their replacements up to speed, to train actually and put their replacement up to speed with the skills needed to perform specific company tasks. This is why some organizations see trainings as an inducement, an investment that should go a long way to increase organizational commitment to employees and reduce employee turnover. Though others argue that the extent to which this holds true depends on the type of training. This this opposing school of thought think that general training is counterproductive to the organization, as it rather leads to an increase in the employees' external marketability and their mobility. This school of thought thinks that firm-specific trainings, which is more specific to an organization and less useful to other employers, ties employees to their actual employer more, hence leading to a reduced employee turnover and an increased financial performance as the marginal productivity is boosted. With regards to knowledge gained, two categories of knowledge can also be deducted. They are the explicit and the implicit knowledge. Why the explicit knowledge detrimental if it leads to increased employer expectation, which raises job stress. Secondly, a human capital theory which assumes that the level of education can determine an employee's earning and productivity. Suppose two things happen. One, that when such employees leave, the organization will incur replacement costs in terms of hiring new employees and trying on and actually giving them the necessary knowledge through training. Such expenses build building such expenses would hurt the organization's finances, and two such expenses and two such capacity building through training could increase organizational commitment depending on the type of training. If the training is firm specific, it will be less useful to the employee outside that organization. This is most useful in making them more stable to the organization they are presently working for. Meanwhile, general training would instead make them more marketable externally and also more mobile, and can even induce their thought of leaving. Thirdly, the social capital theory, which explains that the ties that workers create within and outside the organization is vital, with the reproductive benefits it could bring to an organization. Losing such employees could thus negatively impact the organization's operations through the resulting operational disruptions that could occur and which also have financial repercussions. Information flow, which improves communication flow, could thus be hampered because of this. But before we delve into that, it is important to understand what a company's performance is. Performance is generally viewed in three angles: operational, financial, and administrative. But in this episode, we shall focus on the operational and the financial performance of an organization. For most organizations, this is relatively straightforward. But when it comes to organizations like microfinance organizations or institutions, the hurdle of trying to attain their social role and yet stay sustainable at the same time makes measuring their performance difficult. No doubt, some school of thoughts think that measuring their performance requires knowledge on the impact activities found in their strategic objectives has had. More light has however um, uh, been thrown in the past as to how performance of microfinance institutions is measured or are measured, whereby besides the more conventional ratios like the return on equity, debt to equity, and liquidity ratios, the concept of financial average could be introduced as a more comprehensive approach to measure the performance of microfinance institutions, given that this approach looks not only into the financials but also on the social aspects of the microfinance institutions. In essence, this means that the performance of a microfinance institution should be measured using operational indicators like the level of accessibility to the underprivileged and poor, efficiency of the services they render, etc. Without this complexity, financial performance can be measured through profitability. Meanwhile, on the other hand, operational performance is measured through one, the rating customers or clients give regarding the quality of products and services the organization offers. Two, how dependable the organization's products and services are in terms of how fast the services can be delivered and how readily available their products are. Thirdly, is how flexible operations are. Data generally utilized in source research. The format should be standardized and based on pre-established responses whose analysis will be done using various statistical formulas and graphs. The latter, which is qualitative data, is based on words whose collection is non-standardized and which will first need to be categorized into teams, then quantified to make sense of the data. This categorization could be done using your own subjective conceptualization. This deduction procedure should adopt what empirical researchers refer to as a deductive research approach. By using a survey questionnaire to collect the data, it would mean that the data will be collected in one take, making it quicker to not only complete the data collection process but also do its analysis. One good thing about this survey method is that it also comes with little risk. Even though risks of false responses and a questionnaire not being returned will be present, this approach principally involves the testing of theories or through data that will be collected entirely through a survey questionnaire. Though this method of collecting primary data may attract few responses if sent at the wrong time, especially on Fridays or days close to public holidays and weekends, this type of questionnaire is convenient primarily because the respondent can answer at their convenience. Also, there's no need for a face-to-face meet, thus making it economical with its low cost per completion. Not forgetting the fact that the absence of an interviewer will reduce the possibility of bias, especially in the way the question may be asked. Though this method has an inherent risk of untrue responses, it is a better choice uh, uh, when compared to interviews, or when compared with doing interviews, for example. If you're time constrained, you should adopt a cross-sectional technique which should be able to describe and explore the situations which you're trying to detect by analyzing data obtained from a representative subset at a particular point in time. But if you are not constrained by time, a longitudinal study would be appropriate, given that insights into change over a long period of time will bring about deeper insights into what could be happening. In order to effectively carry out the survey through the questionnaire, it is recommended to carry out sampling techniques that will enable you to collect data or a subset of a target population. Even though sampling is a technique that reduces the amount of data available to make conclusions about a particular issue or question in hand, collecting data from an entire population or doing a census doesn't always guarantee that more useful insight will be generated from such data. And also, it wouldn't be wrong if you only infer the information gotten from such sample data to the entire population. It is also okay to sample because at the time of carrying out your findings, not all the staff of your organization or your company may be available to take the questionnaire. Another reason is that it actually saves time to use sampling techniques. Working on a large data set will need you more time to collect and analyze the data, but working on a smaller data set has the potential of letting you actually give out more accurate analysis. It should be noted that a population refers to the total number of cases that fulfill a particular set of specifications and which are relevant for your data or analysis. In doing this detection, actually, all employees in the target population, regardless of their designation, duration, unit, or experience in the organization, should be considered and handed the questionnaire either electronically or in person. In deciding the sampling frame, make sure that every element or case in the sampling frame is relevant in helping attain what you actually are trying to achieve. This means that all the available and accessible staffs should be used to get the required data. A systematic sampling approach could be suitable or suitably used for this. This sampling method means that each of the elements in the sampling frame shall be given a distinct number, and then the first element should be selected using this random number before going ahead to calculate a sampling fraction which shall now actually subsequently be used to figure out the frequency of the selection. After collecting this data through online platforms like Google Forms, the following steps can actually be used to analyze this close-ended questions data. The first step that I actually recommend is, since the Google Forms tool is a very versatile tool for performing internet-mediated survey questionnaires, you can use the platform's download functionality, which permits you to download all individual responses that were submitted into a single CSV file. This file can then be exported as an Excel worksheet into Excel. The second step that I would recommend is use two sheets that can then be created within this Excel workbook. The first one should contain raw data downloaded on Google Forms, and you can title that one raw data. Then the second sheet can be titled data processing and analysis. The third step will be from the raw data sheet, each question email addresses of its responders, their responses can then be copied into data processing and analysis sheet that you created earlier in step 2, which will allow you to then compare them with the original predetermined responses. The fourth step would be the comparison. The comparison in step 3 can then be done using Excel's COUNTIF formula, which will permit you to derive the exact number of responses vis-a-vis the original predetermined responses. From these, the percentage of responses given by responders to the original responses can then be obtained. This will then facilitate the next step. The final step for these close-ended questions would be the percentage of responses given by responders to the original responses comparison can be presented graphically through bar charts where reasonable. Where presentation through a chart is not feasible, tables can actually be used to present the means, standard deviations, and frequencies of that particular question. For the open-ended questions, I would recommend you use the following 2 steps. Step 1 will be, since the responses of such questions are not predetermined, their responses should be quoted in the responder's original word and categorized into 3 themes. And then step 2 will be this should then allow you to obtain the number of responses and the percentage of responses per theme. The analysis can be visually presented on a table. In summary, the processes, techniques, and procedures adopted to analyze and present the data you gather using the survey questionnaire should be elaborated using the open-ended and closed-ended questionnaire responses by analyzing them through charts and tables to understand the role of employee turnover on the organizational performance of your company. The human capital indicators and human resource management practices which affect performance at work are analyzed through the perspective of those who left the organization and how their presence or their absence influence operational performance, where operational performance is measured by how well the employees can carry out their jobs on a daily basis. That is, their routine tasks like customer service, finance and general management tasks. Employee turnover in my own organization is highly recurrent, with the data analysis revealing that all representative units at the organization have lost a co-worker within the last 6 months. After collecting this data through online platforms like Google Forms, the following steps can actually be used to analyze this close-ended questions data. The first step that I actually recommend is, since the Google Forms tool is a very versatile tool for performing internet-mediated survey questionnaires, you can use the platform's download functionality, which permits you to download all individual responses that were submitted into a single CSV file. This file can then be exported as an Excel worksheet into Excel. The second step that I would recommend is use 2 sheets that can then be created within this Excel workbook. The first one should contain raw data downloaded on Google Forms, and you can title that one raw data. Then the second sheet can be titled data processing and analysis. The third step will be from the raw data sheet. Each question email addresses of its responders, their responses can then be copied into data processing and analysis sheet that you created earlier in step 2, which will allow you to then compare them with the original predetermined responses. The fourth step would be the comparison. The comparison in step 3 can then be done using Excel's COUNTIF formula, which will permit you to derive the exact number of responses vis-a-vis the original predetermined responses. I would recommend you use the following 2 steps. Step 1 will be, since the responses of such questions are not predetermined, their responses should be quoted in the responder's original word and categorized into 3 themes. Then step 2 will be this should then allow you to obtain the number of responses and the percentage of responses per team. The analysis can be visually presented on a table. In summary, the processes, techniques, and procedures adopted to analyze and present the data you gathered using the survey questionnaire should be elaborated using the open-ended and closed-ended questionnaire responses by analyzing them through charts and tables to understand the role of employee turnover on the organizational performance of your company. The human capital indicators and human resource management practices which affect performance at work are analyzed through the perspective of those who left the organization and how their presence or their absence, influence operational performance, where operational performance is measured by how well the employees can carry out their jobs on a daily basis. That is their routine tasks like customer service, finance and general management tasks. Employee turnover in my own organization is highly recurrent, with the data analysis revealing that all representative units at the organization have lost a co-worker within the last 6 months. The departure of valuable employees from an organization makes the pinch of employee turnover on an organization to be felt more. In my own case, I found out that 71.4% analysis, at 71.4% analysis, my data portrays that most of those who have left the organization have been valuable to the organization, and their presence impacted the present employees a lot in the way they carry out their daily tasks. I couldn't confirm that these valuable employees who left possess within them the general or firm specific knowledge, as my data was intended to be collected from those who had left, but only but only my data was not intended for collected for those who have left, but only from those who are still currently working with the company. Um, One aspect that is evident in the human capital theory is the fact that the type of knowledge one possesses upon leaving an organization is vital in determining the degree to which employee turnover hurts the operational performance of an organization. The two types of knowledge were distinguished in my case, which are explicit and tacit or implicit, with explicit knowledge being knowledge that is available within documentation such as the organization's policy and which can be easily transferred from person to person. Meanwhile, the implicit or tacit knowledge is hardly transferable and is gained through experience. Some people actually argue that operational disruption is quite often observed more during the period a new employee is on his way of acquiring this implicit knowledge acquired to perform his job or required to perform his job. The data derived from this study partly, from my own case actually, partly indicates this aspect that the lack of experience was even clearly implied when one of the responders, whose free text response, which are categorized under high influence, said files were files we were working on went pending because it took a while to hire someone in their position. A further 77.8% is attested to this, and this is rather strange because up to 55.6% recorded that there were or that have been uh, they've been that they have been between 3 to 5 years experience working for the organization, and it's only recently that they lost an employee in their unit. One would have expected their long work experience to have minimized the operational disruptions. Perhaps this is because what the organization offers the employees as training is is just a general knowledge which can be communication will be disrupted, and hence operational performance will slow down or slump. My own case, my own data actually unveils this reality, and even more, as responders said, they had not just they had just an okay relationship with the departed employees, but also a cordial and supportive one, whose presence enhanced information flow in the organization, such that when these employees left, the flow of information was not only impaired, but also this implicitly led to a fall in their output and performance. It is overwhelmingly clear that employee turnover can negatively influence not only operational performance but also financial performance. Nonetheless, in my own case, you can actually found that just a limited amount of uh, of uh, of this can actually hurt the outflow of employees. Most people actually only imply that uh, the negative influence on financial performance. Most people actually, anyway, they've never been any kind of clear-cut uh, proof that when there's an outflow of employees, the financial hard figures of an organization will be affected. Most people just extrapolate from the negative influence, just extrapolate this negative influence on financial performance by basing their judgment on the fact that if employee turnover negatively affects operational performance, then it has also the right or will also negatively affect financial performance. Even though this is largely true, what better way is it for you to confirm this if not through collecting data that can help you confirm this view? Uh, in my own case, there's support for the general view, given that 55.6% confirmed that it is highly costly in terms of cost of replacing the employee who left. The replacement costs here constitute cost of hiring, orientation and induction of new employees, etc. It is this it is this it is this no doubt it is thus no doubt actually that the more employees keep living the way that they're doing, the more this cost will soar, and the higher it would reduce the overall profitability of the organization. So right now all these things are happening. Uh, Employee turnover has always been happening. It will never stop happening. Most organizations see it. Most organizations face it. It's a reality in most organizations. So, but actually, the strategies that organizations can put in place to actually solve this problem or to try and solve this problem, I recommend career growth and compensation, where employee turnover, which has received a lot of research and attention because of its strategic importance on an organization's well-being. The high cost associated with employee turnover has necessitated the need to invest in human capital, as it has been suggested to increase an employee's productivity, earning, and well-being, which could potentially also increase productivity at the workplace. A way to improve the effectiveness of the employees could be through training programs which instill firm specific knowledge to the workers and make them less marketable externally, and therefore reducing employee turnover. It would be quite vital if not the re- if if not the return on investment will be obtained fully before the employees leave, as the employees won't be able to put this training to use. The power of financial motivation in boosting productivity on employees cannot be overstated. My own case, I actually found that employees are overworked and aren't paid salaries that are commensurate to their work. In this light, I would suggest, I always, my own case, I suggested introducing a pay rise or bonus scheme that is directly related to output, whereby the more productive a worker is, the more their bonuses. And also, salaries should be revised to reflect the actual market situation. This is what you can actually bring onto the table in your own organization to try and better up the scene or the case of your company. The work environment, the organization should capitalize on the fact that as it is at the moment, there's a cordial and supportive social atmosphere reigning in the organization. That is my own case actually, to strengthen harmonious and collaborative work spirit where workers feel like they belong to the organization. This kind of involvement has been suggested to lead to the motivation of employees. That's true. That is very, very